should Zuma succeed in securing Downer's recusal, will he be entitled to an acquittal, as his lawyers have submitted to the court? Well, in some respects, we've tried to answer that question, but let's have the experts weigh in. Legal analyst Benedict Phiri joining us now via our video link for his take on this matter. And Benedict, it's always great getting your insights on these issues. Thanks so much for making time. I imagine that's the fundamental question to be asked this morning, isn't it? Are we actually, I guess, reckoning with the fact that if Billy Downer is stripped of his title to prosecute, does that necessarily mean that the NPA is also stripped of its title to prosecute, and consequentially, this case will have to be thrown out? In other words, Zuma's acquitted.
Yeah, that is absolutely the central question that Piet Koen will be determining. And, you know, to a degree, you know, the legal maneuvering that he has is quite constrained because there is a Supreme Court of Appeal matter, a 2014 Supreme Court of Appeal matter, which says that this special plea for lack of title to prosecute is not actually aimed at dealing with matters of prosecutorial bias or prosecutorial misdirection, for instance. And what it says beyond that is that actually the right remedy or the right way to frame issues of prosecutorial bias or the kind of conduct that former President Zuma complains about is actually through the fair trial provisions of the Constitution, right? And that is not the case that the former president has made. He's made his case strictly within the confines of Section 106, and within that basis, I think Piet Koen is not going to have a lot of room to maneuver to find in favor of the former president and thereby acquit him.
Interesting. So if I understand you correctly, you're suggesting that the former president might lose this on a technicality.
It's not so much a technicality, but so much as how he argued the matter, right? The question of title to prosecute, when it comes to prosecutors, the courts are very clear that that does not attach to an individual prosecutor. So even if we spoke about Billy Downer not having the ability to prosecute Mr. Zuma because of his indiscretions, does the NPA as a whole, and I heard Zianda speaking to this, have that title? And what we know from the oral submissions from Advocate Mpofu and both the written arguments that have put before the court is that we don't attack the NPA's title to prosecute as such. And any attack that has been laid at the NPA's door speaks to historical submissions, conjecture, and aspects that have already been dealt with in Mr. Zuma's stay of prosecution application that has been dispensed and that went against him.
Among the sticky points, for lack of a better term, is this allegation that Billy Downer essentially leaked the former president's medical records to a journalist. That has certainly been the, call it, headline-grabbing detail. But, I mean, I wonder if, for instance, Billy Downer does concede to that information making its way out of his hands one way or the other, but is able to prove that it was in the public interest. Does that save his skin, or is that equally damning nonetheless?
I think there definitely is a question around Billy Downer's conduct within that extent, right? And hence Mr. Zuma taking the next step of preferring criminal charges. But I think we must put that step within the context of what is likely to happen next. Firstly, there's casting aspersions as to the continued conduct of these proceedings with a cloud hanging over Billy Downer's head. And then secondly, if you remember my comment around the Section 35 fair trial right, I think what we're seeing is the former president potentially laying a basis for somewhere in the future in the conduct of this trial saying, I may not be afforded a fair trial because either the NPA is investigating Billy Downer or either the NPA has actually charged Billy Downer with contravening the NPA Act, whatever the case may be. And when you look at that as a conspectus, we are talking about, can justice be administered in the context of that cloud hanging over Billy Downer, right? So I think we are seeing a carefully orchestrated strategy being laid at this point in time in, you know, assuming that it might not go well for the former president today, which I think actually won't be the case for him,
So put differently, you're saying that what might happen in the future is the former president saying it's not fair to continue with this trial in a context where Billy Downer still being investigated for the charges I laid. Is that accurate?
Yes, I certainly think that we may see that coming in the future, given the timing of these criminal charges in the context of what's happening today. Because let's not forget, in front of Piet Koen today is this very conduct. He's going to make a factual determination around whether the leaking of this confidential medical information has any bearing on the continuation of this trial. And when that factual determination comes out against Mr. Zuma, he's at least reserved a backdoor for him to argue for his fair trial rights.
Never a dull day in the country's courts. Benedict Phiri, always great getting your take on these issues. Thanks very much indeed for speaking to us. Benedict Phiri, legal analyst, joining us there via our video link.